Welcome. Welcome to the first hearing of the Portfolio Committee number 7 into allegations of impropriety against agents of the Hills Shire Council and property developers in the region. The inquiry, which was sparked by serious matters raised in a speech to the Parliament by the member for Castle Hill on 23 June 2022, is examining the integrity of processors, employees and elected officials of the Hills Shire Council and the role and influence of developers and their interactions with councillors and members of the Parliament in the region. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respects to elders, past and present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I also acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Before we start this morning, I will say a word about why we have a short hearing today. The committee invited several key individuals to give evidence today who may be able to shed light on some of the matters raised in Parliament by Mr. Ray Williams MP. Despite numerous attempts to communicate with them, these individuals have so far chosen not to cooperate with the inquiry. This apparent lack of willingness to appear before the committee to date is making it difficult for the committee to inquire into the very important matters concerning the integrity of the Hills Shire Council. And for this reason, the committee has decided to hold a third hearing next week. And I urge the individuals concerned to use the opportunity to address the allegations that have been aired in a public forum. I do thank the witnesses who we will hear from this morning for making the time to give evidence. We will open with a short session with Mr. Fritz Murray and then hear from Mr. Michael Edgar, the General Manager of Hills Shire Council. Before we commence, I would like to make a couple of more brief comments about the procedures for today's hearing. Today's hearing is being broadcast live via the Parliament's website. A transcript of today's hearing will be placed on the committee's website when it becomes available. In accordance with the broadcasting guidelines, the House has authorised the filming, broadcasting and photography of committee proceedings by representatives of media organisations from any position in the room and by any member of the public from any position in the audience. Any person filming or photographing proceedings must take responsibility for the proper use of that material. This is detailed in the broadcasting resolution, a copy of which is available from the Secretariat. While parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses giving evidence today, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of their evidence at the hearing. I therefore urge witnesses to be careful about comments you may make to the media or to others after you complete your evidence. Committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the protection of parliamentary privilege. In that regard, it is important that witnesses focus on the issues raised by the inquiry, terms of reference, and avoid naming individuals unnecessarily. All witnesses have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. If witnesses are unable to answer a question today and want more time to respond, they can take a question on notice. Due to the short time frame of this inquiry, written answers to questions on notice are to be provided within 3 days of receipt of the transcript. If witnesses wish to hand up documents, they should do so through the committee staff. In terms of the audibility of the hearing today, I remind both committee members and witnesses to please speak into the microphone. And finally, could everyone please turn off their mobile phones to silent for the duration of the hearing. I also just acknowledge that we have 2 committee members participating by WebEx, one of whom will join us physically shortly. I now welcome our first witness, Mr. Fritz Murray. Could you please state your name and position title and swear either an oath or affirmation?
Chair, just before you do,
yes,
I would like to declare that I may, having taken advice from the that on the public record, and so far there hasn't been any conflict, but just to put on record that it may occur.
Thank you, Ms McDonald. That's noted.
Chair, if I could disclose a similar conflict as Ms McDonald, please.
Thank you, Mr Rath. That's noted.
Chair.
Is it, yes?
I thank those members for declaring those. I might table a document which has come to the attention of the opposition for the inquiry, just a suggestion about the conflicts of interest relating to these and other members.
Thank you. Is this something I need to deal with?
Yeah, I think we should
now?
distribute.
Yes.
I'm simply tabling that.
I think that's fine.
Perhaps the things like members' partners' names could be redacted before it's published.
Yeah, we've got to decide whether we publish it at the
So
end.
we haven't decided to publish it all.
Yeah, it's just being tabled, it's not being published at this point.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I wonder if someone could just take is it one page or something they could take a photo and send through to me?
Yes, Mr Barrett will do what we can right now to get that to you.
I'll just
there-
wait while it goes to Mr Barrett. I just want to raise the question. I'm appreciative that Ms McDonald and Mr Rath have indicated that they may have a conflict of interest in relation to that. They haven't provided any description or chosen to absent themselves or not be involved in relation to this inquiry. The opposition has some significant concerns about that, particularly given the information that's just been provided to the committee, and also given the letter that we received from Mr Amato in relation to his significant concerns about the participation of these members and his exclusion from this committee. So I'm seeking advice from the chair about what the options are for the committee in relation to the participation of these members.
Thank you. Look, just looking at the content very briefly, and the document is tabled, perhaps the best course forward is that the committee has a deliberative about this matter at the end of the session. And we proceed with the witness. Would that be suitable to you, or would there be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can do that, but I suppose we're just raising that, you know, the committee is starting, and we have significant concerns about the conflict of interest of members of the committee. That, but you know, we're not seeking to hold you up today.
Yeah, if you want to reserve on that, Chair, that's understood.
All right, thank you.
Chair, could I just say that so far, just to Mrs McDonald's point, is that so far there's been nothing that has been raised in any of our meetings that whereby being
I think we've just lost Mr. Rath. Look, I think you know, matters of conflict of interest.
Hills Council matters were raised, but that hasn't been
Mr.
in any way.
Mr. Rath, would you mind just repeating, because we lost you for a few moments there?
Well, I'm almost in, so maybe it's better if we discuss it when I come in. But I was just saying that so far nothing has come up that has been a conflict for either Mrs. McDonald or myself. So, I mean, we're disclosing a potential conflict that may arise during the hearing or the evidence that's received. But to date, I just want to reiterate, there hasn't been anything that has come up where there has been a need to be, you know, conflicted or to need to remove ourselves from the inquiry in any of the in any of the evidence or deliberations so far.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Look, I think, matters of conflict of interest will go to the detail and the self-assessment, but there is also, disclosing the very nature that arises of the perception of conflict too. And I think that from the document, without disclosing the full details of the document before me, perhaps even if the members raising want to at least describe the potential conflict or what might be perceived, or whether we discuss this at a later point, noting that these matters have been raised, they're on the table.
Yeah. Chair, we've got a witness here.
I'm concerned about that.
Yeah.
But I think you've reserved.
I've reserved.
Discuss this in the other forum, and I think we deal with the witness as it is now.
Thank you. I think that's a sensible way to proceed, and we would like to commence with hearing from Mr. Murray. Thank you. All right, so just noting that we will determine a bit later. Thank you. Let's start again. I now welcome our first witness, Mr. Fritz Murray. Could you please state your name and position title and swear either an oath or affirmation?
My name's Fritz Murray, and I'll take the oath, if that's right.
Thank you.
I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. And Mr. Murray, would you like to make a short opening statement?
No.
Nothing at all?
Not at all.
Thank you. So now the members of the committee have a few questions, and I think we will start with questions from members of the opposition, if that's okay. Thank you.
Great. Firstly, Mr. Murray, thank you for appearing. It's great to appreciate by the committee. Any light you can shed on this matter. Firstly, you're a successful businessman. You're the Managing Director of Mainmark Australia, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's essentially an engineering firm, is that?
It is, yeah.
Correct. And you've been clear in your correspondence with the committee that you're not a property developer. You've never been a property developer. You placed that on the record.
I've never developed any property, never had any dealings with property developers.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're also clear that you have had a meeting with two individuals, and you refer to that meeting. One of those was Christian Ellis, the other was Jean-Claude Perrottet. You detail in your correspondence you have had a meeting with them, is that correct?
They came to my office once.
Yeah. And that's your office in DY?
Correct.
That's the main office of...
No, it's not.
No, okay, it's a... Yep, so it's an office in DY.
It's my personal office, yeah.
Yeah, great. And when did that occur?
I just can't recall. Probably it was before COVID, so...
Yep.
Time's just gone quick, maybe 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Was it, so thinking back, was it 2018 or 2019?
No. Must be about 2019 because COVID started 2020.
Yeah. So likely 2019, and the start of 2019 or the end of 2019?
I just can't recall.
Yeah. And who initiated that meeting?
I had a call from Claude Perrottet wanting to come and talk to me about some matters which he didn't describe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he rang you on the telephone,
he
said, I'd like to come and meet. Didn't describe those matters though, and at that point you had never met Christian Ellis?
Never, no.
Yeah. And you've only met Christian Ellis on that one occasion?
I believe it's the only time I met him. He came along with Claude Perrottet, and I think that's the first time I met him. I can't recall what he looks like.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But you had met Claude Perrottet?
I had, once before.
Yes, okay. And to the best of your recollection, firstly, that meeting went for about 10 or 15 minutes.
I'd say 15, yeah.
15 minutes, yeah. So it was not a long meeting.
No.
To the best of your recollection, tell us what was discussed.
Claude introduced Christian Ellis. They sat down at my conference table. They told me that they wanted to unseat a sitting member of Parliament, a federal member in the seat of Mitchell, and that they were raising money for that, and they thought that I'd be a prime candidate to contribute to that.
So, and that federal member of Parliament would have been Alex Hawke?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and was he named in that discussion?
He was, yeah.
He would have been, yeah.
He was.
Yeah. And why did they feel, as you say, that you might be a prime candidate for approaching to ask for something really on the other side of Sydney?
Yeah. Well, the argument that, and I can't recall whether it was, I can't recall which of the two said that, but they said because I was friendly with a previous Prime Minister who got unseated, and that Alex Hawke was one of the people who had the numbers to unseat him in Parliament, and therefore they thought that I should help revenge that and unseat him in his seat of Mitchell.
All right. So, and their suggestion was you could contribute to that, as you say, revenge by contributing money.
They didn't use the word revenge.
Yeah.
These are my words. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's a useful clarification. But they thought your contribution could be to donate some money
To get rid of Alex Hawke. Yes.
Yeah.
To stack his seat.
And how much money was proposed?
$50,000.
$50,000.
Yeah.
And what was proposed to be done with that money? That $50,000.
They didn't tell me.
Yeah.
They were going to stack his seat. That's all I recall.
Yeah. So $50,000 to stack his seat. That might have been for perhaps memberships, or it might have been to. One suggestion has been for a call centre to contact people who might be sympathetic to that idea of joining.
I recall they did use the word call centre. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So a call centre was specifically discussed, but really only in passing, as you say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the vehicle to which you might pay this?
They never told me.
Yeah. So
because at that point I think I terminated the conversation.
Yes. Yeah. 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 What was your reaction to this suggestion that you might contribute $50,000 to unseating a federal member?
The member, whatever I think of him, he was elected by the voters, and it's up to them to unseat him, not me. Simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that a view you expressed? Absolutely,
and I still do today. Yeah.
Yeah. And did they give you any other details about for what this money was going to be used for?
No,
yeah.
They didn't. No.
Yeah. So it was really a proposition that pay $50,000 to. I'm just struggling with to whom was this going to be paid? Was it to these two individuals or to a company?
They never suggested a company or whom. I never got that far.
Yeah. And a call centre was discussed in your mind. Yep. Sorry, I interrupted you. A call centre was discussed.
A call centre was discussed, and the details of it I just don't recall because I wasn't interested.
Yeah. No, understood. In your mind, though, there was no doubt this was about branch recruitment, branch stacking in another term. This was about increasing the numbers of branch members in the federal electorate you've referred to in order to change who that member was.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And can you recall any of the other details that they put you in that discussion?
No, I don't, because it was a very short discussion.
Yeah. Was there any... So this was very much about Alex Hawke, the then sitting member. Was it at all about the Hills Shire Council? Did the Hills Shire Council come up at all? No.
The word Hills or Hills Shire didn't appear in the conversation. Yeah. At all.
And there was no suggestion at any point that this might be paid to a firm, a lobbying firm?
No, never.
Was there any mention of the Beckington firm in particular?
Never heard of that, no.
Okay, so that didn't come up. And in the publicity, in some of the media coverage relating to this meeting, there was discussion about a text message which you received from an associate sometime later Well,
you've got that off the Four Corners program. That's you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm referring in part to the Four Corners program, referring to a text message you received from an associate sometime later.
No, the Four Corners program alleged that I'd received that.
Yeah, what do you recall about that text message?
It was totally unrelated. I'd rung the person who sent me the text message about a totally different matter. And in the middle of the text message, because I've now retrieved it, he said, he referred to the $50,000 and he thought that was going to be more than they needed for recruitment or stacking. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, and was there another suggestion about what the money might?
Not at all, no. And I'm happy to share the message with you. I didn't with the journalist, but I'm happy to afterwards open the phone and you can have a look at it.
Great.
No problem.
No, that'd be good. Perhaps that'd be very helpful.
Yep.
Perhaps if you were able to, the way we'd normally deal with that in the committee is if you would agree to table that text message.
Sure. Happy to do
that. And that way we enter it. It's covered by parliamentary privilege and that's the appropriate way.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I thank you for that, that agreement. And how you then say you've had no further dealings with these two. How did the meeting end? This was a suggestion, $50,000 to change a federal member of parliament, to recruit people to the party. You clearly were not going along with this. How did the meeting end? Where did you leave things?
They left. I said goodbye to them. I've never seen Christian Ellis or Claude Perrottet again. There were a few phone calls later on to ask me to come for coffee on Martin Place, and I avoided that.
And who were those phone calls from?
Claude Perrottet.
Yeah. And when you say coffee in Martin Place, is that at the government offices?
I wouldn't know because I didn't entertain that.
Yeah, no, understood. And how many of those phone calls would you have received following up this proposition?
By memory, probably two.
Yep.
Two, yeah.
And were they soon after or a long time after?
Depends what long is in your terminology. Is it a day, 2 days, is it a month, is it a year?
Yep. Yeah, well, any recollection of the time period?
Recollection would be probably a couple of weeks after.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's,
but
it's pretty
some
vague.
time back.
It's not an important part of my life.
Yes.
They sort of came in and out, and I've been thrown in the middle of this because somebody said, here's a text message, which I'm going to give you.
Yeah, no, good. Were you surprised to have this proposition put to you, though?
Yes, yeah.
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 That's Chair. Can I just raise a point of order here? The meeting that... sorry, do I have the call?
Yes, go.
The meeting we're referring to here, it's been outlined it had nothing to do with the Hills Shire. The witnesses actually described what it was about, and it's nothing to do with anything mentioned in the terms of reference. I just feel we have strayed quite some way from the terms of reference for this inquiry.
To the point of order,
Thank you.
I mean, these areas clearly overlap. The witness has given evidence that at no point was the Hills Shire Council raised, and I think that's clear. That doesn't mean in the background that these two issues were not related. In fact, that may be a matter we turn to later.
Well, to the point of order, it is an inquiry into the impropriety of Hills Council and various developers. It's not about internal political party processes, which seems to be the entire gist of Mr. Graham's questioning so far.
Sorry, to the point of order, Chair. The allegations made by the member for Castle Hill draw directly members of Parliament into the concerns about the activities that occurred in the Hills Shire and the branch activities that have occurred in the Hills Shire. Mr. Murray is being very cooperative, and we need to remember that Mitchell covers that entire area. We believe that this is in order. We're being careful about the way that we ask these questions, but it is absolutely within the terms of reference. To suggest otherwise is to ignore the issues raised by Mr. Williams.
I thank you, all of you. The point of order is a valid one to raise, and I think that given the terms of reference and the fact that there is some breadth around that, to be looking at the matter as broadly as we can I think that we are on good territory to carry on. If I think Mr. Murray, again, I would thank you too for being so cooperative, and if you're content to carry on, then we will carry on.
I can tell you, I can only answer what I know, nothing else. Yeah.
Thank you.
But as for the Hills Shire, I've never had any dealings with them. It was never raised by either of the two people, Mr. Ellis or Mr. Perrottet. The word Hills was never raised. Hills Shire wasn't raised. The company you referred to, is it Bennington you said?
Beckington.
Beckington was never raised.
Yeah.
No.
So, Mr. Murray, you're probably wondering what you're doing here then, why you're being called.
I wrote to the committee to say I think it's a fishing expedition, but I'll cooperate. Yeah. In the interest of what you're trying to find out. But I'm not here to dob people in. I can only answer what you... it's like a court, you've got to answer.
Mr. Murray, can I just ask you briefly, when you said that you knew Mr. Perrottet, Mr. Claude Perrottet, from previous occasions, could you describe how you knew Mr. Perrottet?
I only met him once. I was asked by an MLC, or Perrottet was referred to me by an MLC. He was raising some money for, I think, Young Liberals or something like that, and I donated.
Which MLC was that?
David Clark.
Thank you.
I think my colleague may have some questions.
No,
And it was only a small donation I made.
No,
it was for the Young Liberals, I think it was. Yeah.
No, that's okay. So you had contact with previous MLC, David Clark, to donate to the Young Liberals. And what was the donation for, do you recall?
Young Liberals, I think
Just
it was.
a general donation.
Yeah.
It wasn't for recruitment or
No,
for
not at all. No. And that what it was $1,500 for a table of 10 people somewhere for dinner, and I didn't have 10 people to go, so I just gave them $1,500. So that's what it was.
No, that's great.
Nothing else.
No, that's fine. But you don't know what the function, you can't recall what the function was?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Murray, are you familiar with a group within the Liberal Party called the Reformers?
No, I'm not. No.
You've not heard that term
No.
before?
No.
When you've met with Mr. Jean-Claude Perrottet previously, he's not mentioned that
No, he hasn't. No.
before?
No.
There's what contact have you had with Mr. Damien Tudor-Hope previously?
With Mr. Damien Tudor-Hope, I was involved with a number of people to what we call democratise the party, which meant we were asking for plebiscites in the Constitution. Mr. Tudor-Hope attended some of the meetings. That's about all.
And you're not aware that those meetings were being held by a group called that called themselves the New South Wales?
They weren't the Reformers. It was Tony Abbott, Walter Villatora, myself, Senator, well, he wasn't Senator, General Jim Molan, and a couple of others. And Damien Tudor-Hope attended, I think, twice.
Right. These were the meetings around rank and file pre-selection for.
It was rewriting our constitution to make sure we didn't have the factions controlling the people who went into Parliament, that every member had a vote and not just the factions. And I was involved in that. So
that's good. I wanted to ask you about and you said that basically the Reformers is not something that you're familiar with.
No, I'm not familiar with it at all.
Mr. Abbott was very involved in these meetings that you were having?
Yes, yeah.
And are there other current MPs that were involved in it that you can recall?
No.
No. In what about the member for Hawkesbury?
Who's that?
Robin Preston.
Never met him.
Tanya Davies.
Never met her.
In relation to some of the meetings, can you recall where some of those were held?
Which meetings?
The meetings that you were talking about in relation to...
They're mainly held here at 50 Martin, I think it was 50 Martin Place. Yeah.
50 Martin Place, is that the
I think it was 50,
offices?
it's Martin Place.
Yes, is that where the government offices are?
No, they were in the offices of a legal firm. We used their boardroom for our meetings.
Okay, great, thank you very much. And you haven't attended this, I just want to ask you about a bunch
Sure.
of meetings. If you haven't come, that's fine. I just wanted to ask you, and they're from a while ago, so I understand that memories can be challenging around. So around April 28, did you ever attend a meeting with, and I think Damien Tudor-Hope was there, at Kennett Hills Bowling Club?
No, never been to the bowling club there.
Might ask you actually the venues, that might be easier actually.
Sure, just,
No. Beecroft Bowling Club?
no, never been there.
Have you been to Kennett Hills Bowling Club?
I've never been there.
I'm not a big fan of bowls.
Not a big, bowling clubs are not a venue of choice, Mr Murray. Thank you very much. Castle Hill RSL?
Never been there.
No, you don't, so you haven't spent much time in the hills at all?
My parents used to live there, but they left 10, 15 years ago.
And so Mr Tudor-Hope came to some of those Democrat meetings. You say there's no other MPs that did?
I think he came to one or two of those meetings out of probably 40, 50 of them.
Thank you.
That's all.
And that's all from me. Thank you.
I might just return to a couple of details.
Sorry, point of order, Chair. I think this witness was scheduled until 10 o'clock.
Thanks, Mr Barrett. I was just about to point out, I think we've just about reached 10 o'clock. We did have a bit of time delay starting. Are you content to go
Sure.
for a little bit?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr Murray. You've been very generous with your time.
Right.
Mr.
Thank
Gray.
you, Chair.
Thank you.
I might just return to that meeting that you've described in some detail. I thank you for that.
Which meeting is that?
This is the meeting in the DY office with the two individuals. Another claim about that meeting, about its purpose, you've described, I think, quite clearly what happened. Another claim about what was discussed there was that, in fact, there was no discussion about money, that this meeting was called and convened for 15 minutes to discuss the fact that you might have been upset that you were not serving on a federal council at the time, perhaps locally.
Not at all.
I'll just give you the opportunity to respond to that description of the meeting. Is that an accurate description?
It's not accurate, no.
Yes, okay, thank you. And can I ask you about if these... So I think you've given us some very specific details about the particular approach to you. Can I ask now more generally about the issues that were sparked by these concerns when Ray Williams spoke in the Parliament about this, if you have heard in the course of your travels any of these issues being raised? Do you have concerns about payments being made to lobbying firms that then flow into branch recruitment practices in the Liberal Party? Is that something that's been raised with you elsewhere?
Not at all, no.
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 In general, that is not something you're aware of?
Not at all, no.
Yep, thank you. And are you aware, I think you've given us some, you've indicated already that the Hills Shire Council was not raised, but are you aware of any link to the money that was being raised, to the branch recruitment operations that were proposed, and the dramatic change in the representation of the Hills Shire Council, that is the mayor and 6 sitting councillors being turned over?
No.
Yeah, so that's not something that's come up in your...
No, it hasn't come up, no, at all.
Yeah.
And I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah. You have appeared here today. Happily, you've answered questions very directly.
I've been asked to come, and I can only tell you what's in my mind.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
You may not always agree with it, but...
Yeah, no, precisely.
Yeah.
Some witnesses have not appeared. In fact, they've been quite hard to find, is the view of the committee. Are you aware of any reason why those witnesses may be trying to evade, appearing as you have done
I
this morning?
read this morning in the newspaper, I think it was this morning's paper, that they were hard to find, but I have not spoken to them.
Yeah. So
I've only spoken to one of your people here in the room, and that's it.
Yeah. You can't help us find them. You're not aware of their whereabouts?
I wouldn't know where to. I think
Yeah.
you should go and ask the Premier. It's his brother. He probably knows where he is.
And from your point of view, I mean, shouldn't they do what you have done, turn up and answer questions?
If you have
on
nothing
this
to
issue?
hide, that's what you do. Yeah.
Thank you,
Simple.
Mr Murray.
Thank you. Thank you for attending the hearing. The committee members may have additional questions for you after the hearing, and the committee has resolved to take the answers to these along with any answers to questions. I don't think you did take any on notice, but they are to be returned within 3 days. But the Secretariat will be in contact with you in relation to anything.
If there's anything else you need to ask, feel free to do. I'd rather not this thing prolong.
Yes. Thank you. And the staff and the Secretariat will see you about the text message that we formally tabled.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Thank you.
So I'm excused?
You are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I now welcome our next witness, Mr. Michael Edgar. Could you please state your full name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation?
Thank you. My name is Michael James Edgar. I'm the General Manager of the Hills Shire Council, and I'll take the oath, please, Madam Chair. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar. Now, would you like to start by making a short statement to begin?
I have a short statement if you would like me to cover that.
Yes, please. Please do. Thank you.
I just thought it was important to give some context. I've worked in local government all my working career and spent my time at initially Blacktown City Council and moved to Blue Mountains and been at the Hills for the last 17. I was appointed the General Manager of the Hills in 2017. As you know, the role of the GM is a pivotal one in the council in that it's the go-between of the day-to-day operations, which I'm responsible for, and the governing body, which is the elected councillors. I am their only employee. The rest of the council is my responsibility. My experience of council is it's always had a culture of continuous improvement and looking to be the best that it could possibly be. It was one of the first councils almost 20 years ago to introduce its own audit committee, well before it was ever mandated, in an effort to give councillors assurance around the day-to-day operations and direction of council. It's overseen many audits in that time, including audits from investigative bodies that cut across planning functions. Planning functions are a big part of the day-to-day operations for a council, particularly a growth council like the Hills Shire Council. We've been a growth council for many, many years now, decades. Like our neighbours, Blacktown and Penrith and beyond. We've got a long-standing reputation, I believe, in managing growth for Sydney. And in the last financial year, for example, we processed well over 2,000 applications, and the estimated value of those applications is around $2 billion. And there was around about 215 subdivision applications in that year as well. All up in my time at the Hills Shire Council, if I could summarise for the committee. In terms of housing lot production, if I just focus on that for a moment, when I first arrived in 2005, the average was around about 400 dwelling lots per annum. That continued to post the GFC years, and it's been over or at or around 2,000 per annum ever since. So it just shows you the level of investment and the activity, and of course how much we would be involved in the day-to-day operations around planning functions. As you would know, the Act sets out the role of Mayor and councillors quite clearly. They're primarily directed at the strategic policy and planning activities of council rather than the day-to-day. In terms of planning applications, I think I could summarise into two main types: planning proposals, those that want to seek to change policy, and development applications. For some time now, council laws have no role in development applications, but they do have a role in planning applications. I think the council has developed with its skilled staff over many years very robust processes around supporting planning applications and dealing with those. We were one of the few councils, one of 3 councils last year, selected for a performance audit by the New South Wales Audit Office in relation to development assessment. I was very pleased, the council was pleased of the results, because it was a rigorous audit over the year, and it found that we'd established processes to support compliant and effective assessment and determination of development applications. In terms of planning proposals, yes, they are not delegated to council unless they are so minor and at the end of the process the Department of Planning and the Minister delegates back to me the power to finalise an LEP amendment. Most planning proposals are initiated by either the council, either under direction of the state or under its own direction, or by applicants. When I first come to local government, councils could choose whether they accepted planning proposals from external applicants or not. That's not the case now. All people have the opportunity to lodge planning proposals with the council. Last year, so the council does deal with planning proposals, and it deals with it in a couple of ways. One is an application will be lodged, unless it's initiating it itself, but even if still, before it proceeds to any further, it needs to be reported to council in a full public meeting, open to anybody. And that first decision is around whether the council seeks to send the matter to the Department of Planning for what's called a gateway determination. At that point, it's really the Minister and the Department of Planning that decide whether it proceeds or not, and if it does proceed, under what conditions it proceeds. And usually it'll be conditions around certain things prepared for exhibition or resolved for exhibition, or the exhibition itself. If a matter is given a gateway approval, it usually then proceeds to an exhibition process. Before it's ever reported to council in the first instance, it these days does go through the local planning panel for comment. So the council's got the benefit of the officer report, the local planning panel, and it makes its own determination from there. Under our code of meeting practice, we do allow speakers for and against items on the business paper in the council meeting. So people that propose it can speak, people who may not be supportive can speak, or otherwise. After exhibition, depending on the results of that exhibition and what that process determines, the matter is then reported back to council again in a full open meeting. Anyone can attend, again, for a decision as to whether it will firstly consider the input that's been received, consider how that might influence your decision and your policy, and then make a view as to a recommendation as to whether it proceeds to finalisation or not. And finalisation means effectively the making of the plan, and it goes through a whole process a bit like your legislation through Parliamentary Council and so forth. Ultimately then it's a matter for the Department and the Minister to determine the finalisation of the matter. Sometimes the Council chooses not to finalise, and there's examples of that. Sometimes the Council will choose to finalise, but it doesn't proceed by government, and vice versa. So there are a couple of decision points by not only the Council but others in that process.
So, Mr. Edgar, may I just interrupt there? So, you're pointing out that councillors at a number of points make very significant decisions regarding big planning proposals and whether they go forward or don't go forward.
Yes, they do, but they're not the only decision maker, because if a council decides not to proceed, for example, the Planning Minister and the department, through their department, can decide it does proceed.
Yeah, thank you.
So yes, they are the first governing body, if I could put it that way, that has the first say on, first of all, whether does it get off first base and go to a gateway. Then following all of that, at the end point, well, having regard to everything that's come before it and been said, does it stop or does it proceed? And then that decision has to be really determined by the department. It's not determined by the council from there.
Thank you.
In terms of planning proposals and dealing with council, it's not unusual to have divergence of views. In fact, it should be expected. So decisions on planning matters aren't always unanimous. And as it is the policy of the council, and that's where the governing body should be doing its work, you would expect at times there'd be a contest of ideas, and that certainly does happen. But all decisions in planning matters these days are recorded and available on our website, and there's a record of voting by each councillor that was in the meeting at the time it was mattered. Developers are a major stakeholder of our council, and any growth council, to be honest with you. They are, and my entire career I've been involved in development in one way or another, whether it be regulatory or whether it be approvals or even in my role now. So they are a very key stakeholder of the council, and it is important that your relationships with developers are professional, and that the public can have confidence in decisions you're making. We do have a pretty good induction program for staff, but also councils around conflicts of interest, inappropriate interactions. We do as part of that, suggest to councillors that if developers contact you, the best way to manage meetings with developers is at council offices and with a staff member in attendance. I'd have to say, since the removal of councillors from DAs and removal and we introduced last year a planning proposal policy that provides opportunities for developers to brief councillors all at once at the same time with staff. Since we've done that, the demand for meetings has diminished somewhat.
Mr. Edgar.
Yeah, Mr. Edgar, would you mind if we start asking some
questions
now?
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's such a fantastic insight and commencement. Thank you. Mr. Graham, I see you're jumping.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar, for appearing. I might just give you some background firstly about why the committee has been keen to have the council here. It was, I think, probably not that you might shed specific light on these serious allegations. I'd be surprised if these have come in the first instance to the General Manager of the council, but given this is an inquiry into this council area, the committee felt it was important that you have a chance to be here, put any views on the record that you have in these matters, as you've just done, and perhaps give us some context as you've started to do. So that's, I anticipate, the main areas of questioning, certainly from the opposition's point of view. I'm going to put the specific allegations to you that have been raised, though, in case you, to give you the opportunity to place on the record whether you do know or don't know about what's been suggested. Before I do that, I will agree. I've read the performance audit from the Audit Office, and I agree with the way you've described it. It did recognise the role that the professional council staff are playing at the moment in this space. I will put to you the concerns, the allegations that have been put in the Parliament, though, about what's going on in your local area, and they've been put by a member of the government. This was what he had to say. Allegations have been raised with me that senior people within the New South Wales Liberal Party, a member of the Liberal Party state executive and former Hills councillor, were supported financially at the time by a large developer by the name of Jean Nassif. Apparently, prior to the council elections, Jean Nassif of Top Place met with Christian Ellis and other senior members of the Liberal Party who were paid significant funds in order to arrange to put new councillors on the Hills Shire Council who would be supportive of future Top Place development applications. In your role, can you shed any light on these allegations?
Thank you for the question. To be perfectly frank, no. In my role, I'm not a member of any political party, and I don't get consulted on candidates or pre-selections of candidates on any party, and I have to welcome the councils that are delivered through the election process. So I'm not aware of any of that material.
Yeah, that makes sense. If this sort of activity was going on, it's not really the general manager of the council who'd be the person you'd call.
No.
Yeah, understood. The member of the government then went on to raise the concerns about this development in question, though, and said this: it's been well documented that Top Place had purchased a number of properties between Hyes Road and Glenhope Road, Castle Hill, for the amount of $250 million. Once purchased by Top Place, the company then sought a planning proposal through the Hills Shire Council for thousands of new high-rise apartments to be constructed on this land, with some apartments to be above 20 storeys in height. I think one thing that would be helpful, can you give us some background to this particular development or this particular planning proposal? Is that an accurate description of what's at stake here in your local area?
Yes, but I think it is important I give you some context, because once the metro was announced and in around 2011, in 2013, the New South Wales government commissioned some reports around what I will call the 2013 corridor strategy, and it looked at each precinct at each station and looked at development opportunities within those precincts, and Cherrybrook was one of those. So that started a lot of property speculation and transactions, to be frank, right across the corridor, and Cherrybrook was one of those. We did receive a planning proposal in about 2015 by a consultant firm we believe was on behalf of Top Place, and
What was the name of that firm?
Mecone was the applicant.
Could you just spell it out for Hansard? Sorry.
Mecone.
Great, thank you.
But you believe that on the request of Top Place is the view?
I believe they were commissioned by Top Place.
Yeah.
At that point, when the application was issued, the landowners were the original landowners, and it wasn't until some years down the track that land ownership started to change. But we were aware through media reports and others that they had made that Top Place had made some strategic purchases in the area, and certainly we had a planning proposal that was within the precinct of Cherrybrook under the corridor strategy. The planning proposal was different to the corridor strategy. Obviously, what was said by the member for Castle Hill, it did propose rather tall buildings. The corridor strategy of the government's was around about a 3 to 6 storey height limit, if I could put it in that scale, whereas the Top Place proposal had elements that were in the order of 15 to 20, but also in the order of smaller scale as well. Yeah. So it was a fairly large area and probably an attempt at master planning the site.
But so is that a this is a relatively accurate caricature, though? It is a caricature of this development.
Planning proposal,
$250 million purchased, and some buildings, you're making the point, not all buildings, but some buildings jumping up from a strategy of 3 to 6 storeys up to 20. That's an accurate statement.
Yes.
And we're talking about thousands of apartments here, is that?
Yes.
Yes. And it's not the only development going on.
No.
There are others.
There, in terms of the precinct itself at Cherrybrook?
Yeah.
Yes.
There are certainly others.
Yep.
And you're making the point that there are state government changes rolling through here, local government discussion. There is an active planning process here.
Yes.
And these are my words, not your words. Feel free to disagree with them. But while those planning proposals are changing, there's money to be made here with the right development proposals.
Well, I wouldn't use those words because it's not certain or imminent at that point in the process until, as I explained earlier in my opening remarks, till there's a gateway, which is
further down the track.
Agreed. That's right.
I might just...
Can I just ask, is there another motivation at that point that you're aware of?
How do you mean?
Like, is there, with Mr Graham's characterisation that because there's money to be made at that point, is there any other reason that...
Well, I suppose you're in a development game to make
precisely.
a profit. I think that would be...
I think that's unremarkable.
Obvious.
Thank you.
But again, all I was suggesting is that it's a lot, at that point it is a long way
It's still
from
a journey.
certain and imminent.
Thank you.
But there are key decisions though at that point which are worth a lot of money. I mean, the difference between 3 to 6 stories versus 20 is a big difference. So
Absolutely, scale and FSR has an influence on property values, and we see that through the VG revaluation process for our rate process every 3 years.
Yeah,
Certainly, once those corridor strategies were released, the speculation.
Yes, I mean there were
really went.
There were residents pulling together and selling large blocks and getting large windfall gains from that, and they were just sort of mums and dads in their house.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And the community view at this point, there was some community consternation about this proposal. It certainly attracted the attention of the community. Is that the right way to put it?
It did, but the community never got an opportunity to have a say.
Yeah.
So it never got to Gateway, never got to exhibition. So yes, there was commentary about it, but not formally.
Yeah.
As there was right across each station precinct.
Yeah.
And in fact, in 2015, 2017, Council took the government's corridor strategy from where it began in 2013, just did a little bit more fine-grade work. Because if I put it to you this way, if the government strategy said 3 to 6 stories, no one was building 3.
Yeah.
Everyone was looking 6 and beyond. So the council thought fit to, okay, let's do a bit more work here and let's try and get this real. And I remember we filled the chamber one night because we were trying to, we found it in some places it couldn't sustain what the government strategy was.
And I want to turn back to this specific proposal, the Cherrybrook proposal, and I want to just help you put a couple of things on the record that actually you've put to the committee. So these are... I'm quoting now from your words, but I think it'd be helpful to just describe how this has come through the planning process. The Ray Williams speech in the chamber, you say, refers to a planning, and I'm now quoting, refers to a planning proposal in Cherrybrook, in brackets 9-2016-PLP, that was last considered by Council at its ordinary meeting on the 22nd of October 2019, resolved that the proposal not proceed to gateway determination. That was one step, that's correct?
That's the last step.
The last step.
Hasn't been back to council
at council level. Secondly, a rezoning review of council's decision was sought by the applicant, which was considered by the Sydney Central City Planning Panel on the 8th and 9th of April 2020, and it too determined that the proposal should not proceed. You've confirmed that. That's a further step.
Correct.
Yeah. But you're making the point here that it's not as if this site's going to, the series of sites is going to stay at 3 stories in the long term. There will be some development here. This developer, other developers haven't given up on significant development proposals in these areas.
In answer to that question, I do expect, because the government last year exhibited a precinct plan and a place strategy for Cherrybrook, and it generally settled around the 5-storey limit for Cherrybrook, including these sites. And just recently, I don't say this to be provocative in any way, but the Urban Task Group last week welcomed a media release by the New South Wales opposition about revisiting these precincts because they thought they could do more than what the government settled on in their plan late last year. So, yeah, I do expect it to be an opportunity for change.
I might turn to just the changeover in the council, if that suits. you're the general manager, you're obviously not involved in the politics. However, this is a very significant change in the makeup of the council to which you report, to which you're responsible. The mayor, gone, 6 sitting councillors, gone, almost overnight, with very little explanation. Was there any discussion? There must have been some discussion of this amongst council staff. Did you have any explanation about why this change had occurred? Did you hear any discussion about this dramatic change?
Only what was in the media. It was extraordinary, I would say. So I'm not suggesting that it's normal that there be a change like that. But again, when that happened, our job is to run the council and the day-to-day operations.
Exactly.
So I wasn't one to wish to promote and scuttlebutt or conjecture or become involved. In fact, as an executive, when the allegations and we were starting to hear some of the media reports, we said, well, our job here is just to keep doing the job of the council.
Yeah, and that's entirely appropriate, and I think in the view of the committee you have done that. I would just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
You must have, this is an extraordinary situation though, and the committee's trying to find an explanation. In those discussions, those informal discussions, did you ever hear a suggestion about why this dramatic change in the makeup of the council may have occurred?
No, but I was aware through media reports.
Yeah. Do you have any theory yourself as to why it was that these councillors were changed?
I don't think I don't, because I'd imagine that with each party there would be factions within them, and I would imagine there would always be a process of advancing your faction. I'd imagine. I don't know, but I'm not familiar with those processes, and I'm not involved in those.
Have council staff raised issues with you, their concerns with you, that the sort of allegations made by government member Ray Williams about why this changeover occurred may have been linked to development in the Hills Shire Council?
No.
No. Is that, if any discussions you've had, reflected on that that reason?
No, but bear in mind one reason would be is because it stopped the planning proposal that everyone was talking about in Cherrybrook and the developer were talking about was stopped by not only the council but also the planning panel in 2019, which was before the election.
All right, we might turn to another.
Can I ask one really quick?
Yes.
So are you suggesting perhaps that it was just a bit of an unspoken thing? This kind of quite radical thing could just happen because that's party politics, or that's the nature of what can happen with the Hills Shire Council? Is that what you mean by there's no kind of actual conversations other than perhaps what was referred to?
The political environment is kept very separate to the day-to-day operations of the council, and at the end of the day, we've got to serve the governing body that we're delivered through the election process. How the candidates get to be on that ballot box under what party, or even on their own, we're not involved in. And
no,
yes, it might be interesting, but at the end of the day, we've got to deal with what's delivered to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Edgar. I wanted to ask you some questions actually about a completely different site. We've received quite a few submissions through this inquiry in relation to this. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. It's the former IBM Business Park, 55 Kanara Avenue, West Pennant Hills.
Yes.
I get called the Mirvac site, former
IBM
IBM.
site.
How do you refer it?
Sometimes either a Mirvac site or IBM site.
Yeah, okay. Well, I might just use that. I mean, as you know, there's been, I think you referenced this earlier, there is often significant disagreement within the community around this one, around these issues, and this has been one of those. We've had, as I said, we've had quite a lot of submissions to this inquiry about this, so I just wanted to ask you just sort of a few questions about it. The first thing was, I suppose, just the nature of it. There's been sort of two steps, as I understand it. There was the initial rezoning, which caused a lot of community discussion. Is that correct?
Yeah, my word.
Yeah, there's over 4,000 submissions
Yep.
against that.
Yep.
And the issue, and my understanding is that the former mayor, Michelle Byrne, actually, when it came forward to council for discussion about the rezoning, was actually rejected by council, the rezoning. Is that correct?
That was at the end. So,
Just to, could you just give us, again, just give us a bit of the history of that.
so planning proposal lodged. It went through a number of reiterations, and if my memory is correct, give or take, but it started off around about a proposal of 1,800 odd dwellings, and then it narrowed down as the issues came. Council did give it a gateway, it did get a gateway approval from government, so it did proceed to exhibition. You're quite right. It received a lot of community submissions, and 4,000 odd would be among the highest. And when it went to council for a vote to finalise post-exhibition, the council voted no and voted not to proceed to finalisation of that proposal.
Yeah, and then, so what happened then?
What happened there, in summary terms, was the proposal was considered in a range of other proposals for measures to reboot the economy following COVID.
So this is this so-called fast-tracking process post-COVID.
Correct, and it was one of the proposals that was rezoned through that process.
And who put that site on the fast-track list? How did it? So there'd been this huge community uproar, I think you'd say, in relation to this, and council had decided that they didn't want to move forward with it, and that was the rezoning to make that residential possible. So council had made it very clear that the fast-tracking process was in the hands of the state government. Is that correct?
That's right.
And so how did it? So after the rejection from council, what was the? I'm just a bit unclear about how it ended up on the fast-tracking system, and how the state government then just basically overruled the council in relation to it.
To be honest, I'm not familiar with how. My recollection in broad terms is that I think the government called for maybe submissions from people, but they would be the best ones to explain, well then how the process was rolled out from there. We were only informed of the result.
And what happened? So council had rejected this, but then basically the state government has come in over the top and proposed that. What was the response from council in relation to that?
Well, it was disappointed. I mean, it's fair to say that the result to say no was tight. So there was councillors that voted
just to be
for.
clear, the former mayor, Dr. Michelle Byrne, she had to use her casting vote.
Correct.
So it was very
very
close.
tight. That's right. So amongst all of those councillors, though, it was in some part not surprising it might have been selected, but in another part, well, you know, this is taking the local out of local planning, isn't it? So it was more of the confirmation that really the council doesn't have much of a say in its local area when it comes to the zoning and the planning proposal process.
And there's obviously a lot of environmental concerns because of the endangered ecological communities that are on that site, and there was intervention and oversight from the then Federal Environment Minister Susan Ley in relation to this, wasn't there?
I wasn't aware so much about that, but I was aware that when the planning proposal was going through its processes, the New South Wales Department of Environment Conservation raised objection and concerns, and in fact we were unable to resolve them.
No, that's right, because the concern was that the Environment Department of the New South Wales Government raised this issue because this site had been considered so significant in the Sydney Basin that it was actually part of the Saving Our Species program. So on one hand, we've got the New South Wales Government saying this forest and the endangered species that live within it are incredibly important and need to actually be invested in. At the same time, the government's coming over the top to allow that to be cleared. Is essentially what happened, isn't it?
Well, I don't know that as to what happened, but I know what the outcome is, and I suppose I put to you that that's the planning system. The New South Wales government of the day can make decisions around planning throughout the state.
Can I just ask with that, you know, when you started, you said that, you know, the developers are the major stakeholder of council. Are not also communities concerned? RA. Yeah. And are communities really concerned about the environment and 4,000 submissions? And does council see a role that they advocate for those communities that are concerned, given they rely on council to amplify their concerns and voice around that, and hence the 4,000 submissions?
Well, that was because the 4,000 submissions was to a targeted request for what your thoughts are. Yes, I think the community does look to its council and its governing body to represent its interest, and let's face it, the interest of all your community is quite broad. And I think the members of the public are quite surprised at how little impact a councillor has in the development approval process. When they're alarmed about a development that goes up beside them that seems incongruous with their neighbourhood, they're surprised that the council does not have a say to stop that sort of development. So yeah, it is about educating the community, I think, as to who they should be talking to around really the key decision makers about what can and what can't happen in your neighbourhood.
And just to be clear, the height limits on this site have also exceeded what council has previously approved, haven't they?
Wasn't what council approved. So when the planning proposal was approved, it sets a zone, it might set a floor space, might set a height limit, and it might set other controls, what you would call development standards. And then development applications that come in following that need to speak to those standards.
But so, I mean, just again, some of the submissions, and I'm drawing from some of the submissions in relation to this. I mean, they talk about there were height limits stipulated at sort of 9, 12 and 22 metres, but that there are many that are going to exceed that. Is that correct?
The development process, so the planning proposal set up where the development would go and roughly what form, and it settled on around 600 odd dwellings in a range of typologies, apartments down to, I think, small lot housing. Yep. The development applications come in, you are able as an applicant to, if you're not meeting a development standard, put your merit argument about why that standard might be unreasonable or unnecessary in the circumstances. Now, when it comes to height, yeah, height does have an impact in terms of potential overlooking to and from the site. May also have an impact on shadowing. May have an impact on visual intrusion. The applicants put forward what you call a variation to development standards, which we keep a register of on our website, and we're required to. And in fact, that even gets audited fairly regularly by the Department of Planning. If an applicant puts that to the consent authority, the consent authority has to take that into account, and it has to satisfy itself, well, in the circumstances are the variation to that standard reasonable. Now, I am aware on the development applications, some of those, because of whether it be topography or just the change in typology, because I believe it's only about 417 houses now in a variety of typologies. There was some height variation that was put forward, argued on merit, and the determining authority, the consent authority in that case was the planning panel, and they agreed that the development standard in that particular case was able to be varied on merit.
Who prepared the report for the panel?
So council staff prepare reports for the panel to then consider. Much the same way as it used to for council.
Yep. Okay. And did that report recommend approval?
Yep.
It did.
Okay, I've just got one more question, which is about the open space. So there's been some toing and froing around the open space on this, which was that some of the forest was going to be returned to Forest Corp, and now one of the submissions alleges that it's basically going to the planning minister. Can you shed any light on that?
Not involved in who in government gets responsibility for it, and I read that submission and I started to contemplate, well, what that might mean, but then I observed that the Minister for Planning actually holds lots of land in our shire, some of it quite environmentally significant. So I didn't see that as unusual.
But there was some suggestion that Hills Shire Council was offered the land and that you've turned it down. Is that correct?
That was in the planning proposal stage, not post. When council stopped, well, then really.
You just had to hand it over, pretty much.
Well,
out of your hands.
Well, I don't believe we were asked after we stopped the planning proposal. So I do recall before that there was a couple of thoughts about would this go to council, but you'd have to understand that taking on the burden and maintenance of that land would be something that we'd have to carefully consider, and we thought that there were more appropriate authorities that could do that.
Oh, okay.
Even though the land's so significant and part of the Saving Our Species programs and has lots of opportunity to be managed alongside with the state, and any considerations at that point?
Well, the way we're financed, it wouldn't incentivise us to do that really, with respect. So that would be taking on a burden around bushfire management, management of the site around weeds, that we thought there was somebody right next door that could do that and would be appropriate. Bearing in mind the site before it was rezoned in entirety was zoned employment zone.
And yeah, from the submissions, it's quite clear that that would possibly be a better environmental outcome in the long term for the natural environment than this more intensive urban development. So
I think there'd be arguments both ways on that, and it would depend very much on form and scale and so forth. So I think you could probably argue merits both ways on that one.
I've only got one more question I think I'm going to hand back to my colleague, which is that, I mean, the concern from the community in relation to this development is just that it appears that, I think I'm quoting one of them to say that everything to do with this development was non-standard in terms of the height variations, changes, and I understand that planning is an iterative process and things do change from the start to the beginning. I mean, do you accept that characterisation of how we've ended up where we are on this site?
I think you've got to just accept that, one, it's zoned, and the zoning was very deliberate around a planning outcome. We're now getting development applications that are, if I could at least say broadly consistent with that planning outcome, if not more diminished in scale, maybe not with some of the configurations of the buildings. I think there is good conditions and protections around the environment, so I wouldn't say it's doomed. I think it has the potential to be a very unique housing opportunity within the hills and in the locality, and I think that the various interests can be managed in that urban context very well.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Edgar.
Mr. Edgar, thank you for your evidence. I think that's been helpful to give some context to the issues that the committee is dealing with. There is one other matter that I want to ask you for assistance on, and that is that this committee has struggled to find a number of the witnesses who might shed light on what's alleged to have happened here. One of those witnesses that we've been unable to locate, and the committee's been public, that a summons has been issued for this person, is Councillor Virginia Ellis. I just want to ask you a couple of details there. Now, she's one of the new councillors appointed to the council. That's correct?
That's correct.
So as the mayor and 6 councillors were swept aside, Councillor Virginia Ellis was one of the councillors who came onto the council as a new councillor, correct? Maybe just for Hansard, if you can...
Yeah, that's correct. She was a candidate at the election and was elected to council.
Great. And we've been struggling to find her since to give evidence to this committee. Has she been attending council meetings?
Yes, she has.
Yep. I'm looking here at the minutes of the last council meeting, which I believe was on the 7th of February.
Correct.
And I can see that she did attend that meeting. She's listed in the minutes. That's your recollection that she was there?
She was there.
On the 7th of February.
Yep. We may even have vision of
Yep.
it, Madam Chair.
So you can confirm she was there. Have you seen her since?
No, I have not.
No. Have you spoken to Virginia Ellis since the 7th
No, I
of
have
February? Has anyone you know confirmed that she's alive and well?
No.
Have you
Since
received
this-
any emails from her? Is there any email correspondence?
I
that's
have
come
no
in?
email correspondence. I've been away myself, so since that last council meeting I did a family trip to Tasmania, and it's not unusual for me not to hear from councillors between meetings, and I've not had any contact, any email, but that's not unusual.
Have you, and understood, have any of your staff, to your knowledge, had any contact with Councillor Virginia Ellis?
Not to my knowledge.
Yep. Is that something you'd be happy to, after this hearing, check whether or not there has been contact with the council since the 7th of February?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
take
That
that on
would certainly be of
Thank you.
assistance. Is Councillor Ellis in possession of perhaps a council phone?
I would believe so, yes.
Yes. Is there a way to confirm whether she's used that council phone since the 7th of February?
I'm not sure, but
Yep.
I would imagine there would be in this day and age. But
Perhaps you're taking that on notice.
Yes.
Any assistance you could provide there. Does she have access to any sort of council laptop or any IT equipment?
I would have to check.
Yeah.
Under the facilities policy, there is a range of devices available.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know off the top of my head what device each councillor would have.
But again, would you be happy to assist the committee by taking that on notice?
I'll take that on notice.
Yep, and provide any details you could, including whether that equipment has been used recently. Has she logged on to any council equipment? That would be of assistance to the committee, given we're struggling to
I have to
find
take it on notice. I don't know what our capability is there, but
Great.
Thank you.
Just some details that have been suggested to the committee that I might ask if you're aware. One of the central allegations here, and I've put it already in the inquiry, is because Ray Williams MP put it in the Parliament, is that Christian Ellis, a lobbyist at times, is involved in this issue. Now, Christian Ellis and Councillor Virginia Ellis are related, is that correct?
I believe so.
Matter of public record. And in fact, she is his mother. That's
I
your
believe
understanding. Thank you. Do you believe that Councillor Virginia Ellis works for Robin Preston, MP?
I believe so.
Yeah, and she's in the electorate office,
I believe so.
and she's a full-time employee there.
That I don't know, but
Sure.
I'm certainly, whether it's part-time, permanent,
Yeah.
I don't know the.
Understood. No, and thank you for what you have been able to confirm. I might ask you at the... I think this would be appropriate on notice, Chair, rather than in the open session, but can I ask you to supply any phone or address or contact details that the council holds for Councillor Virginia Ellis? Are you happy to take that on notice?
I'm happy to take that on notice. I would believe most contact details are on our website, but
Yeah,
I'll check.
No, so, and obviously the committee's worked with those public contact
beg your
details.
pardon? Sorry.
The committee will have worked with those public contact details,
Yeah.
but any other contact details that are held. And I'd ask that you're able to, if you're able to provide those sooner rather than later, rather than at the end of the normal questions on notice period, that would be helpful. But the committee secretariat will be in contact with that. Finally, can I ask, the council is due to meet again on Tuesday the 21st of February, is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you expecting Councillor Ellis to appear?
I have no reason to. I have no apologies or no information to suggest that she would or would not.
Yeah. No, very good. I'll indicate to you that the committee's expected to have a hearing after that date, possibly. That's a matter for the committee, obviously. That is, yeah, so the council will meet prior to
Correct.
perhaps our final hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's scheduled to meet next Tuesday night.
And finally, so from your point of view, since the 7th of February, you can't help the committee. You haven't seen Councillor Ellis. You haven't had any contact.
Not since that meeting.
Right.
Right, no further questions. All right, thank you. Thank you for attending this hearing, and committee members may have additional questions for you after the hearing. The committee's resolved that answers to these, along with any others taken on notice, to be returned within 3 days, but I note Mr Graham has suggested that we might be able to get the answers to